Welcome to the Profit Answer Man, John Hewitt. It's great to have you join us today.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Most welcome. Can you share a little bit about yourself and your business background?
Well, I have a lot to talk about. It's 54 years. I started when I was at the University of Buffalo. I took an H&R Block course. I loved it. And one of my first blessings was I knew what I wanted to be when I grew up, when I was just 20 years old. And 12 years later, I was running 250 H&R Block offices. And I was having a great time, doing well. And my dad interceded. He was the CFO of a public company. And he liked the little Apple he bought by mail better than the mainframe that was running his public company. So he decided we should develop tax software. So in 1981, we both quit our jobs, built the first tax software for an Apple computer. Way ahead of its time. No one wanted it. H&R Block said, people asked us why we don't computerize. We said, we tried it. Customers don't care. We don't save any money. We're never going to computerize. So it was a different time back in 1982, 81. And got blessed again and found a company in Virginia Beach called Mel Jackson Tax Service. Mel had died. We bought 6 offices from his widow. We merged the two companies. We were the only computerized retail chain in the country. And 15 years later, sold it for $483 million. In the meantime, we had changed the name to Jackson Hewitt, and Jackson Hewitt went on to become $1 billion company. So that was my first major company growth. We have Jackson Hewitt today has about 6,000 offices, 23rd largest franchise chain in the country. And again, I founded and sold that. When I sold it in 97, I had a 3-year non-compete, and it didn't cover Canada because Jackson Hewitt's never gone to Canada. Having grown up in Buffalo, I knew the Canadian tax system. I had done Canadian taxes. And so we opened Liberty Tax in Canada, and within 3 years became a top 100 retailer in Canada. So now I built one of the top 100 retail chains in both the United States and Canada. Came back to the United States in 2000 when my non-compete ended. Now I had to compete against my own name, my own software, and my own system, and my own people. And yet, not only did we grow faster than Jackson Hewitt, we grew faster than them and H&R Block combined. We opened 4,000 offices in 12 years, top 10 fastest growing franchisor ever. Again, a public company worth $500 million. Again, I sold my stock. And now they say third time's the charm. Now I have loyalty brands, and unlike Jackson Hewitt and Liberty Tax, where I just had one company, I have 8 different franchise systems. So that's my 54-year career in a nutshell. I brought in 5,200 franchisees, the only person to build or found 2 of the top 100 franchise chains in the country. And also I did it once in Canada. So just a blessed life.
Congratulations on that. I will say back in 1981, I got an Apple II computer. However, I was only 16. I didn't have vision, and I learned how to play with VisiCalc, the spreadsheet. And that is actually the genesis of what I do today. I just had no idea that the power of spreadsheets was going to turn into what it did. I missed the $1 billion wave that you caught in that you rode. So I'm admirable of that.
Remember the rest of the world missed it too. So we were the first ones that developed that tax software for an Apple. So it's not surprising that you missed it. And you were only 16.
And I was only 16. Yeah, I didn't know any better, but I did know enough to make the $2,000 back then in the 80s to be able to walk in with cash and buy the machine. So I knew a little bit about generating revenue, not so much about the value of what I could do with those systems.
That's a good point that you mentioned that your younger listeners might not be aware of. Apple computers back then, they were only 1 10,000th of the capability as today, but they cost $2,000. And now they cost a few, I mean, they cost far less.
You don't even need to spend $2,000 today. You can buy one for a fraction of that. Mine had a whopping 4K, which is not enough memory to store a pixel on a picture today. And
Phone numbers.
barely a phone number. Yeah, that was incredible. So let me ask you a question. Was it always perfect, or did you face adversity along the way?
I've never seen any human being that didn't face adversity. There is the more you accomplish, the more adversity you face.
And that's true. I don't know that people always realize that. Everyone always thinks it's going to be a nice, easy way to go from the bottom to the top. I always say, I think running a business is like riding a roller coaster. There's the ups and the downs, and when we ride a roller coaster, people put their hands up and scream on the way down. They have fun. I don't know if we do that in business.
Well, if you mean the way down is smooth sailing, we do a little screaming when we're smooth sailing. But you're right. We always face challenges on a daily basis.
So one of the things that I noticed you say, and it's a core principle here with our whole beliefs in profit first, and you said one of the struggles with business owners is that they all talk about increasing revenue, but very few people talk about managing and reducing costs effectively. And I'd love to get your input on that.
Yeah, people have asked me over the years. I mean, I built two chains that have 10,000 locations that became $1.5 billion in corporate in public companies. And they say, what's the toughest thing? And the toughest thing is managing your revenue with your expenses. If you have too much expense without enough revenue, you can go bankrupt. And if you have too much income without enough expense, without enough structure, you can flop because of lack of service. So the key most difficult thing in my lengthy career in building large businesses is managing the growth of revenue and cost at a manageable level.
And I'm assuming you do this because you don't grow to a big company without, but you can actually predict forward cash flow, forward needs of capital, and so forth. I mean, if you sit down and you look at it, you can probably get a pretty good guess of what's going to happen and when you're going to have a cash flow crunch, when you might need to borrow money, so that you can appropriately plan an expansion and growth that doesn't end up bankrupting you.
Yeah, the thing that most people don't do well is they not only do they not project well, but they don't manage their growth along the way. So let's say that you budget an entire year in advance. Well, each month you have income and expenses, and you have to learn as a leader and as a CEO, you have to make sure that if your income isn't on pace, then you have to have less expenses. You can't continue to, and the mistake many people have, and I've helped 5,200 franchisees, and most of them at least many of them, when their income isn't going as expected, they don't reduce their expense. You have to, if you're having lower income, you have to reduce your expense in order to be a steward of financial management.
And I think part of the time is they're always afraid. They're always, at least what I see is they're very hopeful and opportunistic. And so they're always like, well, next month it'll happen. How do you decide when to kind of rip the Band-Aid off and say, look, I've tried and it's not shifting. I need to do something different.
I think it's almost a requirement that if you're budgeting If you're off in your budgeting by 20%, you need to lower your expenditures unless you have a very logical reason. For example, there are exceptions. Let's say there was a tornado or a bad weather. I mean, it could be a week of bad weather in Buffalo where you were closed down for 3 or 4 days. Unless there's some natural disaster that affects it, if it's just business as normal, you better pay attention or you're going to suffer.
And so I think in part of that, though, is to have a business and a cost structure that's a bit more flexible, right? That has the ability to scale up and down. And I think what happens too often is we overscale up, meaning we increase our costs too much and we don't have the ability to quickly cut them because if you're in contracts or you have employees or so forth, it's not so easy to make those shifts that quickly.
Yeah, no, and the way that I handle that is, Rocky, is that when I budget, let's pretend I'm budgeting for $100 million of revenue. Let me change that. I do a budget based on worst case and best case. So let's say best case is 100 million of revenue. Worst case is 70 million of revenue. So I don't budget 70 because if I was on my way to get 100, I can't make it because I'm not spending enough money. And I don't budget 100 because if I'm on my way to only get 70, I'm going to lose too much money. So what I do is I take 60% of the difference. So the difference between 70 and 100 is 30 million. I take 60% of that and get to a 18 million, and I add it to the 70. So my budget is 88 million. That allows me the flexibility of if I'm going to hit 1 million, I'll be able to adjust and make it. And if I'm only going to hit 70, I'll be able to adjust and lower my expenses so that I'm not harmed. So I budget 60%, but I always look at best case and worst case.
And how quickly are you making those changes? Like 30 days, 60 days, 90 days?
It's never more than 30 days. And it could be as little as 2 or 3 weeks, but I never wait more than 30 days.
And so when I look at a business, some of the biggest cost drivers are people and marketing. Um, how do you, is it, it's kind of hard to cut people that quickly, or because they all are like, oh, but I've got so much business right now that I'm fulfilling. And then with marketing, it's this constant battle. Well, if I don't market, then I can't get more sales. And now I'm not going to have the growth revenue. How do you juggle all of that? Or is there some other lever that you're using to reduce costs?
Well, with me and people, I've been growing. I've been in such high growth mode for virtually my whole career that it's usually not having to lay off a person. It's usually that I just don't hire a person. So if I'm going to grow from 50 million in sales to 70 million in sales in a year, then I'm going to be hiring along the way. And what I do is I put a stop to hiring if I'm not on plan. So it's usually not a layoff situation, but I also manage people with incentive bonuses. So so their salaries automatically are going to be less if the company isn't meeting our goals. So for example, let's say that an employee was on a commission that they would get a 5% of their salary based on us hitting certain norms. Well, it automatically is reduced because we're not hitting those norms. So I plan in advance with incentive salary plans, and I stop hiring and postpone hiring if I'm not on my income trajectory.
So, how do you plan for such massive growth? Like, how do you, in other words, when I say that, what I find with a lot of small business owners is they don't, and franchises are key for this, but they don't have the systems and processes in place. And yet, a lot of the small business owners, like, building systems and processes isn't sexy and exciting, right? It's like building the foundation, it's kind of boring. And so they don't always want to do it. And then the question is, when do you start building it? And how do you think about building it up front?
Well, that's a lot of questions. So,
They all
so
kind of go together, but I'll let you unpack it.
yeah, yeah. So let me say this, that I have a tip of the iceberg theory that you have to build systems on things that are going to be reoccurring. And you don't build systems on things that are not reoccurring. So you don't build in a plan for a nuclear attack, right, on your facility. That's right. But you do build, if you have an event that happens, that, and you watch for events and things that affect all of your, or a significant amount of your customers. If something's going to happen repeatedly, hundreds of times, you need a system for it. If something's only going to happen 3 times in the next 10 years, you don't want to waste time building a system for that. So, and you have to do it at the right time. For example, when I start a company from scratch, and let's say that I have 5 franchisees, and someone wants to build a system, a complete system to handle the 5 franchisees. Well, I say to them, it's 5 franchisees. You can do that with paper and pencil and a phone call. I mean, you don't need a system. So you don't need systems until things are happening into the dozens and dozens and hundreds of times. But then you have to build systems to make sure that you're in anticipating issues as opposed to reacting to issues. Most management I've seen in my career, they react to issues instead of anticipate them and plan for them and build systems for them.
So, how do you know what to anticipate if you're forging new ground?
Well, things happen. So things happen. And the easiest way is this, that in our system with thousands of franchisees, what we do every year is we listen to the franchisees. And we once a year at our convention, we ask them, how can we improve our tax software? How can we improve our technical support? How can we improve our digital marketing? How can we improve our traditional marketing? And we break into groups, and then we write every idea down. And at the end of the session, afterwards, the executives and franchise representatives sit and discuss, which of these are we going to solve this year? Which of these are we going to solve in the future? Which of these are we never going to react to? And that's how we build systems, by listening to the people that are closest to the customer. I know the big picture better after 55 years. This is my 55th tax season, better than any human being. But they know what their customers need. And they come to us and say, this is what's happening in my office, and this is what my customers need. And we need to build systems to get this to my customers on a superior basis. So
if you,
by listening to the people that deal with customers.
So if I'm a small business owner and I haven't franchised yet, it's listening to my customer and it's listening to the frontline worker and the problems that they're experiencing. And then it's taking, I call it thinking time, taking the thinking time to look at all the issues, prioritize which ones we can work on, what are most important, where can we make the biggest impact, and then start working on fixing and bringing those to be.
Well said. That's exactly right.
Yeah. What are some of the other issues that you see with business owners and the struggles that they have?
The The biggest disease in American management is inability to delegate, and it's unbelievable that just how people cannot delegate, and all the excuses that come up for lack of delegation. But that's the number one biggest weakness in management in this country, of all the thousands of CEOs that I've helped.
Why do they struggle so much with delegation?
You know, I try not to get into that. I try not to get into their minds to think how they think, because that's, except for to help them. But they have all kinds of excuses. No one can do it as well as I can. And
I can't. I agree to that. But that's you can't do it all.
right. I think that I'm so cocky that I could be at my companies, my public companies, my billion-dollar company, I could be the CEO, CFO, CIO, CMO, a head of HR. I could do anything better than the person that's doing it. But if I did that, I just have one office with a couple thousand customers instead of having 10,000 offices that have done 100 billion tax returns. So you have to be able to understand that. And as a matter of fact, even if you're better at overall, let's say I could be a better CFO than my CFO, he's still going to have traits and skills that I don't have. So I'm not going to do everything better than him. And so he's going to bring things to the table. So what I've always looked for, Rocky, is, and someone asked me this the other day, and this is the way I answered it. They said, I'm getting ready to build my company. We're getting ready to expand, and I need other executives. Who's the first executive should I hire? A CMO, a CIO, a CFO? I said, what you have to do is look at yourself truthfully and understand that as Peter Drucker says in the Effective Executive, people with great strengths have great weaknesses. You have to look for it, and it's different with each CEO, but you have to look for people that have skills that are your weaknesses. If both of us think the same, one of us is useless. So you need to find so I always look for people that are good at things that I'm weak at.
And it's funny because I think most people hire people that they like and they connect with and have similar skill sets with, instead of the opposite, which is find somebody who has opposite skills to your skills.
Exactly. You know, my favorite CFO of all time, he was with me for 12 years. And after about the 10th or 11th year, I said to him, you know, we aggravate each other every day. We aggravate each other every day. But that's what I have you here for. If you agree with me, then we're going to be held back. I need a yin and yang. You need someone to argue with. So yes, I've been a CEO of some annoying people, and they annoy me because, for example, he was so detailed and so cautious, and I'm the opposite. But I need that. If he and I disagree, one thing is certain: if we disagreed, neither one of us had the right answer. The right answer was a negotiation in the middle, and the negotiation never came down to the middle. Almost right. He was usually mostly right, or I was mostly right. But at the end of the day, neither one of us knew the right answer. The right answer was contained between the two of us.
And I've lived through that, and I get it totally. I had a partner in real estate, and that was, we were opposites. And when we could come together and agree, we were guaranteed to make money because we each saw what the other couldn't. And when we could figure out a way forward together, there weren't problems because they were all handled already. Everything was set in thumbs up, go, and we didn't run into the things that we each individually would have went, oh, I didn't see that coming. And so it's definitely much easier that way. What are some of the other struggles that you see business owners face?
Well, they face risk aversion, and they face that one thing that too many owners do is they try to maximize profit today, and even if they squeeze out profit in the future, and they don't look at, for example, with a customer, the average length of a customer in my industry is they stay about 8 years. So customer comes in, pays $300, that's $2,400, right? And they'll resist giving them a $20 discount for something, or even a free tax return today, at at the risk of losing them for the next 7 years. And not only are we going to lose them for the remainder of their lifetime, but we're going to lose all the referrals. And so people struggle with thinking long term. They think short term, maximize cash today instead of the long term value of a business and a customer.
And I think that's a Wall Street mentality. But at the same point, I think even just as people, even the small business owner, they're not planning 2, 3, 5, 10 years out. They don't always have that long-term vision. And I always say begin with the end in mind. When you decide where you want to end up, it becomes so much easier to work backwards. Your steps and your decisions become clearer, and you can also start to see, when do I need to do what? And it becomes much easier to build a map. But when you have no idea where you're going, well, I guess any path will take you there because you don't know what you're doing. And the same thing that comes back to cash is you got to plan the cash for the future of what do you need and when, so that you can hit, when you have your growth milestones, you need to make capital improvements, you have the ability to make those choices instead of just trying to make today or this week or this quarter look great.
Yeah, exactly. And when we have our planning retreat each year to plan the future, we do the same as you suggested. We first spend some time on, we spend an hour or two on projecting 5 years out. And then we spend twice that long on spending on 3 years out. And then we spend a lot of time, now that we know where we're going to be in 5 years and where we think we're going to be in 3 years, then we spend most of the time on how does that affect this year, next year.
And figuring it out. Now, I don't know how much in the weeds you are with taxes. What I have found with business owners is they have this attitude of it's a tax deduction, or if I make this purchase, I don't have to pay taxes. And a lot of them let the tax part of it, kind of wag the tail of the dog instead of making the right decisions and then saying, hey, what's the best tax strategy for this? But you're in the business, so you might know better.
Yeah, I think kind of the opposite, that most people don't either. It's not that they don't even have good tax advice, they don't seek good tax advice. So they'll make a decision without knowing the tax ramifications. And sometimes, for example, it might be better to buy something on December 31st than January 1st, but they don't even ask anyone. So it's actually, what I've seen, Rocky, is the major mistake is that people don't consult a tax advisor. And it's not just businesses. It's when you should get married, when you should, how much alimony, how the alimony is worded in the document. There was a great case, way back in the 50s, where some celebrity paid $100,000 alimony per year for 10 years. And the law was that he could deduct it if he had paid it for 10 years in one day, but he paid it for exactly 10 years, so he couldn't deduct the 100,000 a year. If his attorney had known the rule, he would have he paid it for 10 years, and then the last payment was on the 10 years in one day, and he would have got $1 million in deductions. Instead, he got nothing because of that simple little. So yes, there are some situations where people adjust their behavior to taxes, for sure. But more often than not, they don't, and they lose out.
And I think today, with the tax code being so thick, it becomes harder and harder. And too often, I think they're looking for their tax preparer to do that. And tax preparers they're just not in that place. They're too busy preparing taxes. You need a tax advisor who understands your type of business and your particular situation to bring you the expert advice that is there.
That's exactly right. I see too many taxpayers just take what you give them and don't regurgitate it and give you any advice or thoughtfulness on the future.
So, what are you working on these days?
Well, we have Loyalty Brands has 8 different companies, and my 2 fastest growing are, I'm a tax guy. This is my 55th tax season, so ATAX, our national tax company, is faster growing than H&R Block and Jackson Hewitt and Liberty. And then, but the fastest growing business I have is mobile grooming. It's called Zoomin Grooming, and it's just like amazing how fast that's growing.
How did you get into that business?
I just stumbled into pets, and someone approached us and said, "Would you consider partnering with us and helping us grow our business?" After 8 years, she had 2 franchises, and she said, "I think I got a great thing here, and I have this one franchise that has 3 mobile vans, grossing 600,000 and netting 150,000 a year, and I can't grow my business. Are you interested in partnering?" So we partnered, and it's just exploded. We have, in 2.5 years, we have 100 vans, and we're adding 12 a month. And by this time next year, we'll be adding 20 a month. Well, we're going to be number 1 in mobile grooming in the country by December.
Congratulations. And I guess that's the question a lot of business owners have. How do you know when is the right time to franchise and to go that route?
Well, what I saw, Rocky, is I saw someone quoted the other day that's exactly right. They said, "When should you franchise?" And the answer was never. So I'm going to start out by saying that. Now, even though I've had a dozen different franchise companies, but what I've seen, what happens is this. Well, first of all, let me give you the statistics that there are 4,000 franchisors in the United States. And 10 years ago, there were 4,000 franchisors in the United States. And every year, about 400 new franchisors come on board. So do you understand? I mean, clearly, mathematically, if 400 are coming on board every year and you're not growing, then 400 are leaving. So most franchisors are failure. In fact, can I give you a quiz? I'm sure your guests don't give you too many quizzes, but here's a quiz. There are 4,000 franchisors in the United States today. And to be in the top 50% of all franchisors in the United States, and remember, Jackson Hewitt had 6,000, Liberty has 4,000, H&R Block has 9,000. So I'm trying to throw you off. But to be in the top 50%, how many units do you have to have?
I'm probably going to go with like 10.
Close, very close, very good. It's 20. It's 20. So most franchisors fail. And here's why they fail, in my observation. And when I was with Jackson Hewitt and with Liberty, I just had one brand. Now I've explored 50 or 60 brands and narrowed it down to 8 brands that we own or are partner with. Well, what happens, Rocky, is you get this great mom and pop, and they're doing great. They're making good money, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And people come to them and say, "You should franchise this. I want one of these." Or they think that themselves. "This is a great concept. I can franchise this." And so what I've seen happen is that they typically, it costs, call it $300,000 to really start franchising well. And they don't typically have 300,000 lying around. So they're they come into it with less than adequate funds, and they need the revenue that their mom and pop is grossing to live on. So let's say that you're grossing $300,000 a year and you're living on that money. Now you start a franchise business. Well, now you're already behind the curve because you have to have two jobs. You're managing your mom and pop and you're managing a franchise business. So you already have the man that chases two rabbits catches none, right? Because now you have two things going. And in addition to that, 90% of them are good at handling franchises. They just do not handle. I mean, it's a whole different animal to have employees versus franchisees. The franchisees are rebellious and independent, and they're like children. And I don't know if you have children, but I've had 6 of them, and at times they are rebellious, and they don't listen, and they're cantankerous. Some of them are cantankerous. When you get hundreds and hundreds, you're not going to get everyone's not going to be friendly and lovable. Some people are going to annoy you and badger you, and if they ever fail, and they do because they don't listen, they only fail because they don't listen. We give them a proven system, and some people are wildly successful and some people fail. And it's the same system, but the people that follow the system win, and the people that don't lose. And the losers always blame. You can only blame 2 people, me or them. They blame me first every time.
And I was going to say, running a business is a certain skill set. Creating and building a franchise is a whole different skill set. And that's not to say that the business owner has both of those skill sets. And so it
Rarely
is not. Yeah.
They rarely do. For example, Ray Kroc is a great example. The McDonald's brothers could not build a franchise system, but Ray Kroc did.
And he was very good at it.
One of the top 10 ever.
And I applaud people who do a wonderful job with that. So as we close out, if people would like to learn more about you, the franchise opportunities, what is the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, I'm easy. They can, it's loyaltybrands.com. And if they want a free copy of my book, they can send me an email at John, John, at loyaltybrands.com. I'd be glad to send them a free copy of my book about how I built 2 incredibly successful businesses public companies worth $1.5 billion on less than $20 million investment.
And that is something to be congratulated for. Thank you so much for joining us today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks for listening to this unedited video of the Profit Answer Man podcast. If you'd like to catch the full episode and learn more about what we do, check us out at profitcomesfirst.com. We also go through the Profit First book in each and every chapter in the beginning episodes of the podcast, so check those out as well. Thanks for listening, and here's to you having a more profitable and growing business.